Hi, good evening everybody, and welcome to the daily Rambam Shiur. It will be lesson 116 and 117. We will be concluding the 9th and 10th chapter of Hilchos Nezirut, and we will start the beginning of Hilchos Arachim Vacharamim. And for lesson 117, we will be starting Perek Gimel, Bisk Gimel and Daled of Hilchos Arachim. First of all, good Chodesh to everybody. We are about to welcome the upcoming month, the month of Elul, the Chodesh HaCheshbon, and the beginning, and it is customary always to wish and greet each other, Leshono, Toivo, Mesuko. Once upon a time, Reb Mendel Futterfass shared a story, one of the legendary mashpim who ever lived, and he shared a wonderful story about one of his acquaintances who lived at the Soviet Union, and in the most risky time, he was subsidizing and helping to support the entire underground system of Jewish education in Russia. And he knew very well that he gives away, though he was very wealthy and he had great resources, but he was giving away not only an Meiser, goes without saying, not only a Chumash, but in fact, he knew very well that more than the majority of his income, he is putting towards supporting the educational institution system in Soviet Union in those times. And he asked him, don't you know that it says in the words of our sages, Hamebazbez alibazbez yosher michoymesh. If someone who is giving away in a very generous way, which is being defined as bizbuz, as wasting, he should not waste away more than fifth of his assets towards tzedakah. How come by you happen to waste so much more? So in response, he told him the following. Basically, to put into education, this is not called bizbuz. To waste, what I'm defining, said this gentleman, is to take care on mundane things like your own needs, your own house, your own food, and so on and so forth. So for that reason, indeed, what I'm referring mebazbez is to spend on your personal need, is you should not waste yoisel mechoymesh. But as far as the rest of it, definitely what putting into the right target, into the right place, definitely it's not called bizbuz. I was reminded this story because basically what we are learning at the first chapter of the daily Rambam, when a Nazir was dedicated a certain amount of funds or set aside offerings, and indeed they were more than necessary, which means there is leftovers. So what should he do with these leftovers? Now, leftovers can come in different forms, can come in a physical form of actual animals that were not used, can come in the form of money that were not spent, and can come in the form of a commodity that were not exchanged to money. There is great implication and differences what is the case. So first of all, about the definition. Unspecified amount of money, it's called mois sesumin. Mois sesumin, unspecified. At the moment that the money was not be specified, so therefore he should go and give them to So depends what was the original contribution. If he was contributing this amount towards Nezirim, he took upon himself to sponsor other Nezirim, and there is leftover from the money. So whatever leftover is, he should give it to other Nezirim. If the original leftovers is from what he had intention to bring for himself, so depends. If the money was not specified to which type of korban is it, because a Nazir, he needs to bring, as we have learned yesterday, both in the time of termination that comes as a result of tumo, or termination which comes in a normal way, a perfect termination that does not require him to repeat the Nezirus again. In those two cases, there is a oilo, there is a chatos, and depends, sometimes there is a shlomim if it is a normal termination, and there is a osham if it was terminated by tumo. So in this case, at the moment that it was not specified, he can go and give it to Nedovo. Nedovo is a type of korbanos that were bringing in Beis Hamikdash at the time that the Mizbeach were resting, and generally they used to be called also Ulois Kaitz HaMizbeach. They were bringing for the public needs in order to keep the Mizbeach busy. If, however, those money that left over was originally specified to what type of a korban, it can be specified whether it was for oilo, whether it was for shlomim, whether it was for chatos. So whatever was oilo should be brought to those people who volunteer oilo. If it was shlomim, it should be treated with shlomim. On the one hand, it should not be accompanied with lechem like a nozir. On the other hand, it should be treated as the shalmei nozir, which are being eaten different than other shlomim that can be eaten to shnei yomim v'layla echod. This one should be only yom v'laylo, only yom echod. As far as the chatos goes, it should be, there is halacha l'Moshe Misinai regarding chatois that in 5 cases they would be, their din is tomus, that the chatos need to die, and in case that there is money, those money should be destroyed in Yam HaMelach, Yoilichem leYam HaMelach. So in this case, if the leftover of the money has been designated to a chatos, so those particular money should be treated the same way. If he was designating money for his Nezirus and he died, so depends. If the money was unspecified, they should be given to Nedovo. If they have been specified, they will be treated the same. The money that was designated for oilo would be offered as oilo, shlomim as shlomim with limitation as long as they can be eaten. Whatever was designated to chatos should be taken to Yam HaMelach. Now, if a person was designating not actual cash, but he was designating a commodity, and a commodity can come in different forms, or an animal that is damaged, that is defected and cannot be brought to the temple, so therefore they would be traded and their exchange will be treated exactly as moistumin, that their exchange will go to Nedovo. And if the contribution was even a loshen shel kesef, what we called a silver or a gold bar, they should also be treated as mois stumin, and as we have learned, that they are being treated as nedovo. If an individual, he was committing himself to Nezirut, later he went to a Chacham, and as we have learned yesterday, a Chacham is able to nullify retroactively. And therefore, as a result of it, his Nezirut retroactively is not a Nezirut any longer. As a result of this definition, whatever animal he was contributing can go back and be treated as a total chulin, because retroactively turns out that it was not supposed to be a korban. However, in a case of a woman who was noider, and as we have learned in the previous lesson, the status of the annulment of the father is only from now on and not retroactively. For that reason, those behemoths depends if to who they belong. If this behemoth if this animal were belonging to him, so given the fact that a person cannot dedicate something that doesn't really belong to him, so then it will be okay for her husband to get back the animal. However, if this particular animal that she was contributing towards her offerings as an extension of her Nezirut vow, if this particular animal should be treated exactly as we have learned before about leftovers of Nezirut. So if whatever the oilo should go to oilo, the chatos should die, and the shlomim should be treated in a very strict way of the shlomim. Similar will be if a father took on behalf of his son a Nezirut. In other words, he appointed his son to become a Nazir, and the son protested. So though the son is not committed to the actual vow, yet the destiny of those offerings should be treated exactly as we have learned until now, leftovers of a Nazir. So whatever the shlom, exactly as we said, that the oilo should go to oilo, the shlomim to shlomim, and the chatos should die if it's an animal, or yam melach, in case that there is money in there. There is an interesting case where two Nezirim, one of them became Tomei, and therefore both of them, and it's not clear who is one of them. And the scenario that one aide who saw them from far while they were in a private domain, because always sofek tumo birshus hayochid, any type of a doubt about the tumo in a private domain makes the person to accept and treat his state on this severe way. So we're talking over here that one person was testifying that he saw one of them, but he doesn't remember who was the one that was stepping or coming in touch in a tomidike object. So therefore, each and every one of them is a sofek tmei meis, is a sofek that is contaminated in a dead body. So therefore, they have to, both of them, take it seriously and start a new count. However, since each and every one of them may be also doubtful that he is still tohir, that he is still pure, as such, they have to actually give and to bring the korbanos twice, and each and every one of them each and every time when they bringing the korbanos, they should say that in case that I am the one who is pure and you, the other one, is the contaminated, so my korbanos will be korbanos tahare, and his korbanos will be the korbanos tumo. And the opposite, in case that at exactly the opposite, so the korbanos of his friends on his behalf should also be stating that type of statement. So they actually need to bring double sets of korbanos with the t'nai that each and every possibility of the amount of the korbanos that they're bringing should cover all possibilities of both of certainty and sfeikus. The contents of the second chapter of today's Rambam reminds me something that is also associated with these days, the theme of Chodesh Elul, and everybody is familiar with the question of the Alter Rebbe right at the beginning of Lekutei Torah. How come the time of Chodesh Elul, though the Yud Gimel, the 13 attributes of mercy, they are shining, nevertheless, it's a time that we do say Tachnun. And the answer that he gives by introducing the famous mashal of the Melech who is Basode, the king who is in the field, and he gives a chance to each and every one of them, one of his constituencies, to greet him, and he is Mekabel Kulom Besever Ponim Yofos. He greets everybody with a smiley face. Umar Elohem Ponim Shoichakois, and he displayed to them a happy face. And the Rebbe always, when he was quoting this mashal, and he was expressing the word soichakois, the word that a smiley face, in the expression of ponim shoichakois. Ponim shoichakois in Hebrew, when it's being expressed with a shin, it means a grinding face. So once upon a time, one of the greatest mashpim, Rabbi Reuven Dunin, he explained, what does it really mean? You know, that many times when the Rebbe smiles at you, and though it seemingly on one hand is a very encouraging type of phenomena, but yet on the other hand, it also tells you that the only way for him to communicate with you is only via smiling. So something is very wrong over here, because obviously you're not immune enough to display the actual truth right for you. So the idea of a grinding is a situation when a person is in a really internal struggle. The real internal struggle a person has is when things are in uncertainty. And basically the 10th and the final chapter of Hilchos Nezirut cannot produce any more type of a grinding situation as we are speaking about. We're talking over here about a Nozir who, though originally he intended to have committing himself into Nezirut only for 1 year, but doing this year, he may be exposed, it's not clearly whether he was exposed to a tumas mess, to a contamination, or even further than this, he was exposed to a tzoras. A tzoras is a leprosy. Things are getting complicated for a few reasons. Reason number one, because each and every one of those situations requires different types of offerings, B, there is many implication as far as permitting with wine entering to the temple. Further than this, each and every one of those conditions require a separate type of a haircut, which is called tiglachas. Multitasking is not going to work over here, and you cannot apply one tiglachas towards a few situations. Things getting even more complicated given the fact that this particular individual, at the time when he is becoming Tomei, each and every tumo is being treated differently. While in Tumas Tzoras, as we have learned yesterday, the days that he is in a state of Atzoras cannot be counted as days of Nezirut. However, the Tzoras is not erasing those days that he was actually exercising Nezirut properly. While Tumas Meis, a contamination of a dead person, indeed it is able to erase the previous days. So a person who committed himself to 1 year, and turns out that in that particular year he may be a Metzoiro, so he actually in reality will need to exercise Nezirut for 4 years. How do we reach the amount of 4 years? It's very simple. First of all, after the year, there is a possibility, as we have said, that he's a Tomei Meis. Therefore, the entire year is erased entirely. It's like he did not started his Nezirut. On the other hand, he may be Tohir, but on the other hand, he may be a Metzoiro, as a leopard. And any Metzoiro has 2 types of haircut. The haircut number 1 he takes when he is not a Metzoiro any longer, and then he gotta wait 7 days and take a second haircut. So for that reason, when it comes over here, the second year of actually exercising his Nezirut, after the second year, I would still say, well, he took over here the first haircut. Maybe the first haircut was the first haircut of the Tzoras. Towards the end of the year, it was the second haircut of the Tzoras. Then he needs to go through an entire additional year to have the haircut of the Tumas Mes, and an entire additional year in order to satisfy the type of haircut that requires by a normal termination of type of Nezirut. Towards the end of the Perek, the Rambam gives a major distinction between 2 types of Nezirut. There is one type of a Nazir that he will always link his Nezirut to a condition. I will take upon myself a Nezirut if something good or this thing or the other things will happen to me. This type of an individual, the Rambam defines as a Rosho. However, any person who is vowing a Nezirut derech kedusha in a way of holiness is considered to be a Noe u'Meshuboch. Noe u'Meshuboch, he is praised. Which reminded me an interesting story about the Frierdiker Rebbe. Once upon a time when he was in Leningrad, so one of his secretaries, the Chassidim who were there, informed him that his tea is being cold. The tea was served and he was busy with other stuff, and he says, in the meantime, the tea is getting cold. And the Rebbe Rayatz responded to him, well, what will be about iskafia? Iskafia is the idea of bending and working, refining your midos in order not to express great pleasure to satisfy the nefesh abamis. So the mashpia, the secretary, told to the Frierdiker Rebbe, iskafia is something that is given to people who are not tzaddikim, who are reshoim, or maybe even beinunim, but a person like yourself who have reached the level of a tzaddik, would you be worried about iskafia? For that reason, the Frierdiker Rebbe told him that there is two types of iskafia. Some people need iskafia, and some people desire iskafia. So while you would think that this is indeed the story of from the Hasidic sect of Avoido, yet you see over here a Meferesh Rambam, where that's precisely how he defines the desirable type of Nezirut and the undesirable type of Nezirut that out there. And at the final chapter of lesson 116, we are starting the rules of Arachim and Vacharamim. The word of Arachim means values. Soon we're going to see what type of value we're talking about. And Cherem is different forms of dedication of objects, moving from movable object, real estate, fields, and so on to the temple. The consequence of the holiness that this object will trigger depends also with the connection, the ownership, and the status of ownership a person has towards this particular object. So we'll start with a famous story that once upon a time, one of the greatest Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, known by the name of Rabbi Hillel Paritcher, he heard about the Alter Rebbe for many, many years, and he was trying to meet him. He had many difficulties in halacha, in the Talmud, and he always waited for the opportunity that he will be able to present him his questions. He came to the city that the Alter Rebbe was scheduled to arrive there, and for his dismay, he found out that the Alter Rebbe left the town. He went to the next scheduled town where the Alter Rebbe was about to visit, and again, he missed him. He decided this time he will plan ahead, and finally, he managed to get into this room where the Alter Rebbe was supposed to visit, and he hid under the bed. And he was waiting, and finally the Alter Rebbe arrives, and he hears under the bed the sound of the voice of the Alter Rebbe, as he usually used to speak with a nigun, with a melody. And he said those words, in German, a person who has a tremendous question in Maseches Arachim, in the subject of Arachim, of values that we will cover soon today, he needs to evaluate himself first. And when he heard this, he fainted. When they woke him up, the Alter Rebbe was gone. So he was never really able to see the Alter Rebbe, although he heard him. And the lesson that is associated with this, what triggered him, is the halachos that we're going to learn. In the Torah, in Chumash Vayikro, we're speaking about when an individual takes upon himself to dedicate to the temple an amount that represents the value of one individual. So in order to determine the amount of a value of one individual, there is a table that divides the value according to age and gender. If the age of the person is between 0 and a month, so there is no value. From a month till 5 years, so for male it will be 5 and for female will be 3 shekels. Then from the age of 5 to 20, for a male will be 20 and for female 10. From the age of 20 to 60, for a male will be 50 and for a female 30. And from the age 60 and on, for a male will be 15 and for a female 10. And the question that he was having, how is it possible to give a equal value that will assign this value only according to the age, while I'm ignoring the personal accomplishment and achievement of the person himself? They may be vary from one place, from one situations to another. So therefore, according to him, it was not really a justification to assign that type of prices. For that reason, the Alter Rebbe told him that we tend to go and determine valuation of people based on their accomplishment. But all of it is an external expression, an external extension of the individual. There is something essential that is so deeply rooted, and for that reason, it is beyond us to get to the core reason why the Torah indeed have determined this reason. This ruling, when a person says, Harei olai, it is upon me, erkoi, the value of this individual and the amount that he owes to Hekdesh will be determined upon the age and upon the gender of the person. As we said before, Torah also ignores there is no value to a person who is androgynous, given that there is value in that context only to male or female. On the other hand, someone who is not Jewish, though he himself cannot devote to Beis Hamikdash, to the temple, based upon value of someone else. However, any Jew who decide that it is upon me the value of a non-Jew, so he will need again to bring to the temple the amount based on the age and on the gender of the non-Jew as well. And it is important also to note that there is a difference when a person devotes to Hekdesh based on value of another person, which the only determining factor will be the age and gender. When a person says the cost of an individual is upon me, then the amount that is owed to Hekdesh will be determined upon the price of individual had he been sold in the marketplace as a slave. So that is a totally different story. There is a few differences between Arachim and Domim. Reason number one, when a person says upon myself is a erech, I'm taking upon myself or my erech or someone else's erechs. So there is two-tier treatment. Obviously, if he possesses the amount of money, so then he will have to pay according to the price of this individual. However, if he doesn't have the money, If he doesn't have nothing, so everything will be upon him as a choiv, as a debt, when he will be rich. However, if this individual has only one seller, so this particular seller will go towards what we call heseg yad. Heseg yad is when the Torah considered the poverty of this individual and his inability to make good on his promise, so the Torah will waive him from any further payment. A person can go and, so this is basically the first lesson 116. And now we're going to start into 117. In the upcoming chapter, we're dealing what will be the case when a person says that the value of my hand, the value of my feet, can it be considered as a erchin? And the answer, it's nothing as long as he was not referring to a aver, to an organ that life is dependent on it. So for that reason, if a person says that my heart, I'm giving the value of my heart, since this is an organ a person cannot live without it, so he needs to pay the entire value of the person. If a person will commit and he will say that I will dedicate to the temple my entire height, gold or silver, so depends what type of expression, because sometimes I will require, based on his assessment of his lifestyle, whether it should be a material of gold that is equivalent to his height, and this itself can be in a bendable form, which will require less gold, and sometimes with an unbendable form that will require more gold. And the funds that used to be distributed from the collection of those amounts, they were channeled towards two destinations in the temple. Used to be a destination in the temple that they used to call it Lishkas Hashoin, a secretive department where they used to subsidize and support anim, poor people, bnei tovim, who come from good families. And the second department in the temple used to be called Lishkas Hakelim, where they were dedicating different utensils in order to channel them towards Bedek Habayis, maintenance of the temple. In the temple itself used to be departments that were designed only for the Kodshei Mizbeach, only for the altar type of products, and then there used to be the Bedek Habayis. If the budget of the Mizbeach is in deficit, I can take and fill up the deficit from Bedek Habayis, but not vice versa, since the intensity of the holiness of Kodshei Mizbeach are much more holy, much more intense than Kodshei Bedek Habayis. In the second chapter of the lesson 117, we are dealing basically with a process of receivership where an individual cannot really afford what he is promising to Beis Din. So they will have to go and liquidate literally all his assets. And the only items that they will leave him is sufficient food for 30 days, sufficient clothing that will be able to dress with them for 12 months. And those particular garments and clothes for his children and for his wife are not going to be taken away from them unless it's extra fancy, unless it's extra type of like golden or expensive silk or so on, then it will be liquidated. However, if it's normal clothing, I'm gonna be leaving it to them. If he is also a tradesman, I will give him his working tools. There is two exceptions when those working tools happen to be commodities. So then, though they happen to be working tools, I won't leave it by him. Two examples where working tools are commodities and therefore it will be taken away from him: a boat, or in case of a camel, a horse, or a donkey, that they are means of transportation, though for him it may be a tool of trades, but nevertheless, since it's a commodity, it will be taken away from him. Also, the sale is a quick sale. I'm not waiting until the valuation of those particular objects will appreciate in value, since the Torah specifies v'nosan mi'erkecho bayoimahu, in that day. Ein lecho elo she'atoi. All you have is that particular day, and that's what you're going to deal with. In the fourth chapter, basically we are dealing with real estate. There is two types of real estate a person can possess. There is one type of real estate that it's called Sdei Mikno, a person who purchased his field from another person. This type of field, by definition, he cannot, according to biblical law, possess it more than 50 years. After 50 years, at the year of Yovel, Jubilee, this property goes back to the original owner, Asher Loi Achuz HaSo'oretz. So therefore, the Sdei Mikno is one type. Then there is another type which is called Sdei Achuzo. Sdei Achuzo is a land a person basically was not purchasing it, he inherited it from his parents. Now, when he takes this Sdei Achuzo and he dedicates it to the temple, he is able to redeem it from the temple based upon a size of the sode and a very precise amount of money that is assigned to each and every acre of land. The general measurement is about a measurement of 140 meters by 140 meters, which is a sufficient amount to produce a kur seoirim, a certain amount of a field of barley. And for that amount, for 50 years, the value that the Torah assessed is 50 shekel. For that reason, each and every year represents a shekel. So let's say he sold this sode, this field, the first year after the Yovel. He wants to redeem it 10 years later. He will have to pay the remaining 40 shekels that is being assigned to the value of that particular field. If for one reason or another he did not went ahead and redeemed based upon this price from Hekdesh, not him and not his son, so when comes the Yovel, it will be given, it will be sold, not so, it will be sold to Kohanim only. However, if someone else went ahead and redeemed the Sode, so then when comes the Yovel, then it will be given to the Kohanim, not being sold to them. The reason why it's in one case it's being given and in another case it's being sold, because the ruling is Ein Sode Yoitze mi Hekdesh Beloi Pidyon. Nothing goes out from the head of Hekdesh without a redemption. So as long as someone, a third party, went ahead and redeemed it from Hekdesh, I already satisfied the ruling that a Hekdesh was already received payment in lieu of him giving back the property. And for that reason, if someone, a third party, have redeemed the Soda from Hekdesh at the 50th year, it goes back to Hekdesh. There is one exception. Kohanim can always redeem it even after Yovel as well. The Sode will be given to these Kohanim who are exiting their Mishmor, because soon we're going to learn when we're going to come to the rulings of Beis HaMikdash. And today's Chitas as well has, in the Chumash of today, we have mentioned that there, in the times of Dovid HaMelech and Shmuel HaNovi, they have divided the entire tribe of Levi to different mishmoris, different families, units. And those unit of each and every unit used to come and serve in Beis HaMikdash in a specific time of the year. So this particular mishmor, who is serving in the Friday, which means at the eve of Rosh Hashanah, they will be the one who are entitled to get this Sdei Mikno that was not redeemed by the original owner. If the owner himself, he wants to redeem it, he can until the Yovel. However, an additional premium of what we call the choimesh, a fifth. But contrary to conventional thinking, it's not a 20%, but it's 25%. The reason why it's called fifth, because after I will add this 25% to the original amount, and then I will view it from outside, then it will represent indeed a fifth. Thank you very much, and aksivo v'chasim toivo leshona toivo mesuko.